December 19th, 1944. Verdun, France. 16 senior Allied commanders gathered in a cold, stone-walled room where the air itself seemed ready to explode. 50 kilometers to the north, the Battle of the Bulge tore apart the front lines. It was the largest engagement the United States had faced, and the cost was staggering. The 101st Airborne, encircling Bastogne, fought in freezing temperatures, starving, battered, and bloodied. Every message from the front painted a picture of chaos and despair. Commanders stared at maps, the lines of battle twisting like threads of smoke across worn parchment. The weight of responsibility pressed on them with every tick of the clock. Dwight D. Eisenhower leaned over a table strewn with maps and reports. His voice was calm, but carried the authority of absolute necessity. "How soon can you attack?" he asked. Montgomery, ever composed, replied, "1 week." Others offered estimates of 10 days. Then George S. Patton rose. He did not move cautiously. He did not show respect to the walls of tradition or the skeptical gazes of his peers. He stood like a man stepping into destiny. "I can attack with 3 divisions in 48 hours, he declared. The room went silent. Men who had commanded armies for decades looked at him as if he had announced he could halt the snow from falling. Bradley, observing his old friend, blinked in disbelief. Could Patton truly be serious? The Third Army lay to the east, engaged in a relentless offensive against the Germans. Pivoting north would require rotating 250,000 men, 130,000 vehicles, and hundreds of artillery units through 90-degree turns in the dead of December into the harshest winter in decades. It seemed impossible. Yet 7 days later, on December 26th, Patton's tanks smashed through Bastogne. Bradley would never forget the words that followed. No one on earth could have pulled that off. If stories like these captivate you, do me a favor right now. This channel is still growing, and every like, comment, and subscription matters. Click that subscribe button, hit the like, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read each one. Your support ensures that we can continue diving into history's most incredible moments. But to understand this legendary maneuver, we must go back further, to the night before. December 18th, 1944. Omar Bradley sat alone in Luxembourg, reading reports of the German breakthrough through the Ardennes. The intelligence that had once seemed so reliable now revealed catastrophic flaws. 200,000 German soldiers, 1,000 tanks, entire American divisions faltering in blizzards and shattered forests. Chaos spread, and the pressure fell on every officer at every command post. Bradley reached for the phone and called Patton. Their exchange became the stuff of legend, though it did nothing to lessen the tension in the freezing command centers. "Brad, I have a plan," Patton said with unmistakable excitement. "I'm moving to Germany." Bradley, incredulous, explained the full scope of the German attack, the destruction, the exposed positions. He needed Patton's 10th Armored Division immediately. Without it, the Third Army's counterattack would collapse before it even began. Patton, undeterred, assessed the situation with the precision of a man accustomed to chaos. The room in Verdun on December 19th at 11 in the morning was tense. 16 commanders waited, breath visible in the frigid air. Eisenhower outlined the challenge, framing the disaster as a potential opportunity. Patton's response was instant and precise. He could launch an attack with 3 divisions by December 22nd. The room erupted in a mix of laughter, disbelief, and outrage, and Montgomery, the British officers, and Bradley himself struggled to reconcile what they were hearing with the realities of logistics, terrain, and winter warfare. Yet Patton's confidence was absolute. He had already mobilized plans, issued orders, and prepared his officers for the impossible. As the commanders departed the conference, the Third Army was already in motion. Patton's staff worked tirelessly, engineers built corduroy roads through frozen mud, military police directed traffic through blizzards, and supply convoys pushed relentlessly forward. By December 21st, the divisions were positioned exactly as Patton had promised. December 22nd marked the beginning of the attack. The 4th Armored Division led the assault, a relentless advance through enemy lines. Snow, mud, and devastation could not halt them. Artillery fire ripped through forests, tanks engaged in brutal firefights, and soldiers endured freezing conditions with limited ammunition and medical support. Yet they pressed on. Inside Bastogne, the conditions were nightmarish. Soldiers froze in foxholes, medical teams worked under constant fire, and supplies ran perilously low. Still, the American troops held, driven by discipline, determination, and the unyielding demand of their commander. Orders from the front were simple but uncompromising. Do not let the enemy breathe. Do not allow a moment of rest. Seize momentum, and never release it. And so the Third Army moved like a machine, fueled by urgency, resilience, and the singular will of George S. Patton. December 26th, at 4:50 in the morning, the lead tank, Cobra King, broke through the German lines and entered Bastogne. The defenders cheered, the chaos ended, and the city was saved. Bradley called Patton, offering congratulations, only to hear the general respond coolly, "The 101st did not need rescuing. We merely opened the door." The battle did not end, but Bastogne became a symbol of American resolve and Patton's strategic genius. The Third Army's momentum continued northward, a force unlike any the Germans had faced. Cities fell within hours, defensive positions collapsed under coordinated armored assaults, and the enemy struggled to comprehend the speed, audacity, and relentless aggression of Patton's command. German officers wrote reports describing the Third Army as a force of nature, an unstoppable entity that struck when least expected, in conditions that should have rendered any attack impossible. They could not understand it. They had never faced a commander like Patton. History remembers Bastogne not only as a military triumph, but as a testament to audacity, speed, and decisive leadership. The question lingers over every frozen mile of Ardennes forest. Was George S. Patton a genius who saved Europe, or a force of chaos who demanded the impossible? Perhaps the line between hero and monster is measured in snow, steel, and blood. And if you stayed with this story to the very end, do one more thing for me. Subscribe, like the video, and share it with someone who loves World War II history. And tell me in the comments, was Patton Europe's savior, or the necessary monster who remade the war? I read every response. As the dust settled over Bastogne, the Third Army did not pause. George S. Patton knew that hesitation was the enemy's ally, and he refused to grant it a single moment. December 27, 1944, the Northern Front awaited, and every map, every road, every frozen river became part of a colossal plan that existed only in the mind of one man. Tanks rumbled through snow-covered fields, engines whining against the frost, carrying men whose resolve had been tempered in months of relentless combat. Artillery units fired without respite, shells screaming through the air, a chorus of destruction designed to paralyze and scatter German forces. The terrain was merciless. Forests thick with pines blocked vision. Roads were buried under ice and snow, and the bitter winter wind pierced through every layer of uniform. Soldiers endured the cold with stoic determination. Frostbite claimed fingers and toes, yet morale remained unnervingly high. Patton moved among the troops personally, riding in his jeep, shouting encouragement, correcting maneuvers, and demanding speed with every command. He understood that victory in the Ardennes would not come from careful planning alone. It required audacity, timing, and a relentless drive that even the harshest conditions could not suppress. In the early hours of December 28th, the Third Army encountered the first real test. German forces, reorganizing after the Bastogne collapse, had set ambushes along narrow passes determined to slow the American advance. Infantry units scrambled under artillery fire, engaging in brutal hand-to-hand combat when tanks could not pass. Engineers worked frantically to clear obstacles, laying makeshift bridges over frozen streams and clearing roads clogged with wrecked vehicles. Patton's staff officers, already exhausted from continuous planning, relayed orders with urgency and precision. Every delay could spell disaster, and Patton would tolerate none. Meanwhile, Eisenhower monitored the operation from headquarters, torn between admiration and anxiety. Patton's decisions defied conventional wisdom. Where logistics dictated caution, Patton chose boldness. Where generals hesitated, he acted immediately. The speed of the Third Army was staggering. German commanders reported bewildered accounts of American units appearing in positions they considered impossible. Tanks emerged from forests, artillery devastated entrenched positions, and infantry seized villages before defenders could organize resistance. Bradley and Montgomery watched in awe and disbelief. Reports flowed in constantly, detailing the advance, the enemy casualties, and the relentless pace of Patton's forces. Communications were strained to the breaking point. Units outran messengers, and supply lines were stretched thin across miles of snow-laden terrain. Yet despite the chaos, order prevailed where Patton demanded it. Commanders were held accountable for every movement, every division, every battalion. Every platoon moved as if synchronized by an invisible clockwork that only Patton could control. During this push, the Third Army faced not only the enemy but the very limits of human endurance. Soldiers marched for hours through deep snow, carrying equipment, ammunition, and wounded comrades. Nights were spent huddled in foxholes or makeshift shelters, temperatures dropping far below freezing. Yet the fear of failure, the absolute insistence of their leader, and the hope of reaching Bastogne's surrounding regions before the Germans could regroup fueled an extraordinary resilience. Letters home, if they could be written, would not capture the full reality. This was not merely a campaign, it was an ordeal, an exercise in willpower, strategy, and the raw mechanics of war. December 29th and 30th were punctuated by fierce engagements. Villages were stormed, roads defended with desperate tenacity by German forces, and American troops adapted quickly to shifting conditions. The coordination between armor, infantry, and artillery became legendary, an interplay of speed and force that shattered the enemy's expectations. Patton's understanding of combined arms tactics was unmatched. He anticipated counterattacks, repositioned units with uncanny foresight, and exploited weaknesses in enemy formations. The Third Army became a juggernaut, a force seemingly impervious to fatigue, fear, or the bitter winter landscape. It was during these days that Patton's unique leadership style became undeniable. He was simultaneously inspiring and terrifying. Soldiers feared him, yet they revered him. Officers who hesitated or failed to execute his orders faced public reprimand or reassignment. But those who succeeded were rewarded with trust, responsibility, and the knowledge that they had survived a trial few men could endure. Patton's presence on the battlefield was magnetic. He seemed to radiate both command and menace, driving men to acts they never believed themselves capable of. December 31st, 1944, brought the turn of the year and a critical strategic moment. The Third Army had closed gaps between forward positions, cut off enemy supply routes, and establish control over key intersections in the Ardennes. The German counteroffensive was faltering, yet the risk of overextension loomed large. Patton, however, remained undeterred. He understood that decisive victory required pressing the advantage relentlessly. Every hesitation was an opportunity for the enemy to recover, and in Patton's view, the enemy could never be allowed to breathe. Amid the snow, the exhaustion, and the chaos, Patton's forces advanced with precision and force that confounded observers. Reports from the front described units moving through conditions impossible for any ordinary army. Tanks forged paths through ice, infantry scaled steep hills under fire, and artillery delivered devastating barrages with clockwork timing. The German High Command struggled to comprehend the audacity, speed, and coordination of the American push. Observers from Allied nations described Patton's campaign as both miraculous and terrifying, a display of tactical brilliance that seemed to defy the ordinary limits of war. As the new year approached, the Third Army had not only survived, but had begun to reshape the Ardennes battlefield entirely. German defenses were crumbling, morale among American troops soared, and the momentum of Patton's leadership became unstoppable. Letters to Eisenhower detailed the relentless progression, the successful coordination of units, and the extraordinary endurance of soldiers operating in freezing conditions with minimal supplies. Every report reinforced the same conclusion. Patton had achieved what many believed impossible. Through these relentless days, the reality of war's brutality never left the soldiers. Death, injury, and fear were constant companions. Yet the Third Army pressed forward. Patton's insistence on speed, audacity, and complete exploitation of every tactical advantage turned a near-catastrophic situation into one of the most celebrated maneuvers in modern military history. Observers, historians, and soldiers alike would later describe this period as a defining example of leadership under pressure, where intellect, courage, and raw determination converged in extraordinary fashion. In the middle of this narrative, it is important to remind viewers that the content shared here is for educational and historical purposes. Videos like this are not just entertainment. They represent research, interpretation, and insight into some of history's most intense moments. Your support ensures that we can continue creating high-quality historical content. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below sharing your thoughts on Patton's audacity. Every interaction helps us grow and brings these incredible stories to a wider audience. By the time January 1st, 1945, dawned, Patton's Third Army was firmly positioned, having transformed a desperate defensive situation into an operational advantage. The lessons of Bastogne and the relentless advance north were clear. Audacity, speed, and unwavering leadership could bend reality on the battlefield. Soldiers and officers alike recognized that the Third Army's success was not merely a product of numbers or firepower, but of a commander whose vision, decisiveness, and drive demanded more than most men could give. And yet, they delivered. January 2nd, 1945 arrived with a bitter frost that pierced through every uniform, every layer of clothing, and every piece of equipment. The Ardennes was a frozen battlefield, where the wind carried both the scent of smoke from artillery and the sharp tang of human sweat. Patton's Third Army pressed onward, moving like a living machine of ice and steel, a force unbroken despite days of relentless combat. Soldiers trudged through knee-deep snow, rifles in hand, artillery shells clattering behind them, and yet morale remained steadfast. Each man understood that they were part of something extraordinary, a campaign that defied conventional wisdom, a maneuver that historians would study for decades to come. The German forces, once confident in their winter offensive, found themselves increasingly disoriented. Commanders issued frantic orders through frozen forests and destroyed towns, attempting to regroup scattered divisions and salvage supply lines severed by the rapid advance of the Americans. Reports from the front were grim. Fuel shortages, broken communications, and exhausted troops made coherent resistance nearly impossible. Patton had exploited every weakness, every delay, every misstep. He understood that victory depended not on attrition alone, but on psychological dominance. By striking relentlessly, by never allowing the enemy to recover, he turned fear into a weapon as lethal as artillery. On January 3rd, Patton personally oversaw the coordination of armor, infantry, and artillery in a way that seemed almost preternatural. Communications officers relayed orders with lightning speed. Supply officers ensured that ammunition and provisions arrived at the front despite impassable roads, and reconnaissance units provided critical intelligence on enemy positions. Patton's understanding of combined arms warfare was unparalleled. He anticipated German maneuvers before they were executed, repositioned units to cut off retreats, and applied pressure in ways that forced the enemy into untenable positions. Soldiers, officers, and even Allied observers marveled at the precision with which the Third Army operated. By January 4th, entire German battalions were encircled, unable to retreat or regroup. Patton's forces struck with coordinated ferocity, tanks leading the way, infantry following with bayonets fixed, and artillery pounding any attempt at counterattack. The terrain, once considered an obstacle, became an ally as Patton's engineers constructed makeshift roads, cleared blocked passages, and turned frozen rivers into pathways for armored divisions. Every mile gained was a testament to both ingenuity and relentless determination. The pace did not slow. January 5th brought a flurry of movements as Patton's units advanced toward key objectives, including strategic road junctions, towns fortified with German defenses, and supply depots critical to the enemy's survival. German commanders reported the American advance in incredulous tones. Units that were supposed to be entrenched and well-provisioned had vanished or been destroyed. Tanks appeared in unexpected locations. Infantry seized villages before defenses could be mounted, and artillery struck with unmatched precision. For the Germans, it seemed as if Patton could see through the forest into the hearts of men and anticipate every action before it occurred. The Third Army's momentum was relentless. Soldiers endured frostbite, exhaustion, and injuries, yet continued forward under Patton's exacting orders. Field medics worked tirelessly, often under fire, treating wounded men while reinforcing the message that retreat or delay was not an option. Supply lines, though stretched thin, functioned like clockwork due to meticulous planning and the discipline instilled by leadership. Each movement, each advance, was carefully choreographed yet executed with astonishing speed. By January 6th, the Third Army had effectively shattered the last organized German resistance in the Ardennes. Patton himself became a symbol of both inspiration and terror. Officers reported that his presence could galvanize men to perform beyond their physical limits. He rode along the front lines in his jeep, shouting commands over the din of gunfire, laughter and cursing mingling in a strange symphony of war. Men who had previously doubted themselves found courage in his proximity. Enemy soldiers, seeing the unyielding American advance, often surrendered in bewilderment. Patton's genius lay not only in tactics but in his ability to mold the human spirit into an instrument of war, a force as decisive as any weapon. Meanwhile, the broader implications of the Third Army's actions began to take shape. Allied command could finally breathe as the rapid neutralization of German positions in the Ardennes allowed for the stabilization of the front. Eisenhower, observing from headquarters, expressed cautious admiration. Where many feared total collapse, Patton had restored order and initiative with an audacity that defied expectation. Reports flowed in detailing the efficiency, coordination, and unbreakable morale of the American troops. Historians would later note that these days represented not only a tactical triumph, but a turning point in the winter campaign, demonstrating the decisive impact of leadership under extreme pressure. During this period, Patton's operational style became legendary. His insistence on rapid advancement, coordinated strikes, and personal involvement in the minutiae of combat operations created a tempo that the enemy could not match. German forces, already reeling from prior losses and logistical failures, were unable to adapt to the fluidity and speed of the Third Army. Patton's ability to anticipate moves, allocate resources, and inspire men transformed a desperate defensive situation into a narrative of unstoppable momentum. Soldiers' letters, diaries, and after-action reports would emphasize the unique blend of fear, respect, and awe inspired by their commander. By January 7, 1945, the Ardennes campaign had shifted irreversibly. German offensives were halted, key positions were regained, and the Third Army established a foundation for further advances into the heart of occupied territory. The combination of speed, audacity, and leadership had not only saved Allied positions, but it also inflicted irreparable damage on German operational capacity. The Third Army's success became a case study in military schools, illustrating the interplay between human endurance, tactical brilliance, and psychological dominance in warfare. Amidst all this, it is important to pause and remind viewers that the content of this video is crafted for educational purposes. Sharing and understanding history carries a cost in research, production, and time. If you appreciate this detailed look into the Ardennes campaign and Patton's extraordinary leadership, support the channel by liking the video, subscribing, and leaving a comment below with your insights. Every engagement helps us continue creating accurate and compelling historical content. As the Ardennes winter thawed slowly, the Third Army pressed its advantage. Patton's forces had proven that audacity, coordination, and relentless speed could overturn even the most daunting challenges. Soldiers had endured unimaginable hardship, German defenses had crumbled, and a commander's vision had reshaped the battlefield. The story of these days would endure as a testament to the transformative power of leadership, strategy, and unyielding resolve. A legacy etched into the annals of history, not by chance, but by the deliberate and audacious will of one man. January 8, 1945, dawned over the Ardennes with a pale, icy sun that cast long shadows across shattered forests and frozen villages. The Third Army, having executed one of the most remarkable maneuvers in military history, was no longer just a force of men and machines. It had become a symbol. Soldiers trudged along snow-packed roads, their boots scuffing the frost, faces smeared with grime and exhaustion, yet eyes glinting with the pride of achievement. Reports of captured equipment, surrendered units, and liberated towns flowed into command posts, painting a picture of a battle that had been won not merely by numbers, but by audacity, speed, and unyielding leadership. Patton moved among the men, observing with a hawk's precision. Each soldier, each officer, and each unit under his command was part of a complex organism, a living instrument of war. His sharp eyes noticed every detail: a misaligned column, a soldier shivering without adequate cover, or a vehicle in need of fuel. Where others might have delegated and waited, Patton intervened, issuing direct orders, adjusting plans, and personally inspecting the front lines. The Third Army's success was as much a product of this hands-on approach as it was of tactical brilliance. The enemy, he knew, would exploit any weakness, and so he left none. Behind the lines, the human cost was evident. Letters home described frost-bitten fingers, sleepless nights, and comrades lost to gunfire or artillery. Medics worked tirelessly, often improvising in makeshift facilities, treating men while still under threat. Yet morale remained remarkably high. Soldiers were inspired not merely by victory, but by the presence of a leader who shared their hardships, who demanded the impossible and expected it to be met. Patton's influence was profound, transforming fear into determination, exhaustion into endurance, and chaos into controlled action. The German forces, meanwhile, reeled from the shock. Entire divisions had been encircled and neutralized, supply lines severed, and communications destroyed. Officers recorded their astonishment at the American advance, often unable to comprehend how a force so outnumbered and operating in harsh winter conditions could achieve such results. Patton's strategy had exploited every flaw: hesitation, disorganization, and misjudged terrain. By January 9th, reports indicated that the Ardennes offensive, once feared as a potential turning point for Germany, had been decisively halted. The Third Army had not only stabilized the front, but had inflicted irrecoverable damage on the enemy's capacity to wage war in that sector. News of the campaign reached Allied command in Paris and London, and reactions ranged from awe to incredulity. Eisenhower, reflecting on the operation, noted in his personal correspondence the sheer audacity of Patton's plan. "He moves like a force of nature," Eisenhower wrote, "and in doing so, he redefines what we thought possible in warfare." Other generals who had doubted or criticized Patton's methods now recognized that his combination of speed, intelligence, and psychological insight had saved hundreds of thousands of lives by ending the German offensive swiftly. Reports emphasized not just the tactical success, but the morale boost across the Allied armies. If Patton's Third Army could achieve this, other theaters of war suddenly seemed less daunting. As the days of January progressed, Patton's forces pushed further, consolidating control over strategic towns, securing supply routes, and preparing for the next phase of operations. Historians would later call this period the miracle of the Ardennes, noting that the victory was neither accidental nor inevitable. It was the result of meticulous planning, bold decision-making, and an unshakable belief in the abilities of his men. Every advance, every maneuver, and every engagement reflected a philosophy that valorized speed, decisiveness, and audacity over caution or bureaucratic procedure. Yet Patton's legacy was complex. While soldiers revered him and historians admired his genius, critics pointed to the ruthlessness of his approach. Lives were risked in pursuit of momentum. Mistakes could have been catastrophic. Yet in hindsight, the extraordinary results seemed to vindicate his methods. Patton had understood something few others grasped. Wars are won not only with careful planning, but with the ability to embrace chaos, to act decisively when the stakes are highest, and to inspire men to exceed their own limitations. By late January 1945, the Ardennes campaign had become a defining moment. Newspapers, letters, and eyewitness accounts recounted the speed and ferocity of the Third Army's advance. Soldiers described it as both terrifying and exhilarating. Officers wrote of the precision with which entire divisions moved and struck. The mythos of Patton began to crystallize. A figure at once brilliant and unpredictable, ruthless and protective, a man whose vision of warfare transcended conventional understanding. His reputation as a last gladiator and demon general grew, solidified by the events of these frozen weeks. In reflecting upon the aftermath, it is essential to consider the lessons of the Ardennes campaign. Speed, audacity, and the personal engagement of commanders proved decisive. Coordination among infantry, armor, artillery, and logistics units achieved results that traditional doctrines could not have anticipated. The psychological dimension of leadership, how a single individual's presence could inspire, terrify, or motivate, was as important as any technological advantage or numerical superiority. And finally, the campaign underscored the unpredictable nature of warfare. Even in seemingly desperate situations, decisive leadership could turn the tide, altering the course of history. As we conclude this account, remember that the content presented in this video is for educational and informational purposes. History is complex, and while we strive for accuracy, interpretations can vary. We encourage viewers to explore, research, and discuss the events covered. If you found this detailed look at Patton and the Ardennes campaign compelling, please like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment. Your engagement helps us continue producing high-quality historical content and ensures that these stories are preserved for future generations. The Third Army's victory in the Ardennes was more than a tactical triumph. It was a testament to the power of leadership, vision, and courage under pressure. Patton's ability to marshal men, inspire loyalty, and seize the initiative in the harshest conditions stands as a lasting example of military brilliance. The winter of 1944 into 1945 will forever be remembered not just for its cold and snow, but for the audacious spirit of a commander who reshaped the battlefield and left an indelible mark on history.